All right, and here we are. We're going to start coding our address book application. Here I have the address book folder. It's empty in my MySQL directory. I'm going to go ahead and do what you did and grab the static files that I provided and drag them into the address book. And so here we go. We have add clients, edit, includes index and log out, connection footer functions, and header. And so now what we need to do before we do anything is jump into our phpMyAdmin. And in there, I want to create a new database so we could start totally from scratch so that we can go right from the beginning so we know what it is that we're trying to achieve here. So I'm going to go ahead and go new database. Here we go, create database name. And to keep it consistent, I'm just going to say DB for database and then client address book like that. And then I'm going to create, and now I have my database, DB client address book. Now what we need to do is start off by creating our first table. So let's create the first table and we'll call it users. And let's give it 4 columns and go. Now users is going to give us the 4 columns here to work with, and we're going to start off with the ID. The ID, as you know, is important. It's going to identify uniquely we'll assign an ID to that specific user. And we're just going to have one user for this application, but it's good to do anyway. Int, because it's an integer, and I'm going to give it the maximum length values of 11. And then it's important that we go over here and we say attributes unsigned. That means it's going to start from 1 and work its way up. It can't do a negative value. Index is going to be primary for the primary key. And I'm just going to hit OK here because everything's all the same. AI is auto increment. That's important. So that's what you need to do for pretty much all your tables that have unique IDs. And now we're going to add email. In the next column, we're going to say varchar. Let's go with, well, you can do 255 as the maximum, but if you wanted to just save a little bit of space and optimize your database a bit, you could just say something like 100 because most people don't have email addresses 100 or over. You can leave all the rest of these columns. You can leave all the rest of these options empty because you don't need to do anything with that. Name, this is going to be the name of the user logged in. Let's go with varchar again. And let's, again, go with 100. People don't usually have names longer than 100 characters. And these are all left empty. Good enough. Now password. And then varchar, let's say 255 because we're going to hash it and it could be very, very long. Go ahead and save your database. Everything else should be good to go. And here we have ID, email, name, password. Excellent. Now let's go back to our database here. And let's go ahead and add a new table within our database. And right here, create table. I can also hit new right here if I want. And so I'm just going to go back to the original setting here. Create table name. And we're going to say this one is called clients. And the columns we want to add to this one are 8 columns. And you can always add them later if you forget or you need to add as you go. Start off with the ID. Same deal, int, we're going to say 11. We're going to go over here, attributes unsigned. Index will be primary. Auto increment. Name, this one's going to be varchar. Let's go with 100. The next one will be email. We're going to say varchar. And let's go with 100. Let's go with phone. This one will be varchar. I'm going to say 40 because there aren't many phone numbers more than 40 characters long. Address, we're going to go with varchar again. And 255 because addresses can be long. Company, pretty straightforward. Varchar. Company names are usually less than 100 characters long. And notes, we're going to say text for this one. So it has a lot of space in case you add a whole bunch of notes. And then we're going to say date underscore added. So we know when this entry was added. And we're going to go with timestamp. And then you can choose default current timestamp. And now what we're going to do is for these null options, we're going to make phone, address, company, and notes optional. So you don't have to have entries in there. So that will be the 4th one down, this one, and this one. Just to confirm, notes, company address, phone. And we should be good to go. Save that database table, and there we go. And now what we want to do that we have that set up is create our first user, and we'll just do it here in the database because we're just going to have one user. So go to your users table and hit insert. And we're going to insert our first user and put your email address or any email address for that matter. I'm just going to use a dummy one, or I'll actually use this one, brad@codecollege.ca. My name will be Brad. You could do full name, you could do nickname, whatever you'd like here, and password. Now, this is where you need to find out or create a hashed password. So we're going to go a little bit of just like a manual way of creating a hashed password. If you were to create a sign up form, then you could automatically create the hashed password and store it in the database, but we're just going to do it the programmer style way right now. And we're going to go to our code editor here and just open up for now just the index file in your address book directory. And so we're just going to start off really simply, and we'll just say password equals password underscore hash. And the things you pass in are the password you want to call it. So I'm just going to say ABC123, terrible password. And the second argument you pass in here will be default underscore password. And then we're going to echo the password on the screen here so we know what it is. And I believe this should actually be password underscore default. Now let's check it out. There it is. So there's our hashed password. That is actually ABC123. Copy that and go back to your database, paste that as your password and go. And there we go. We have one row inserted, and there we have our user, Brad at Code College, or whatever it is that you stored as your user. All right. Now that we have that, let's go back to our code editor, and we can go ahead and comment that out because you don't need it anymore, but you might want to remember your password. So just leave it there for now. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go through and start to turn this into an actual application that works with PHP and MySQL. Currently, it's just static and doesn't do anything. So the first thing that we want to be able to do is work with our login screen that we have on our index.php. We want to check to see if the user's logged in, and we want to do the whole login functionality and get that going. So let's get started on that. First thing we want to do here is at the very, very top, always start your session underscore start. And we need that because we're going to be accessing some session variables shortly. And the includes header, that's going to be the last thing that we're going to have in our PHP script here. So everything is going to go above this. So the first thing we want to do is check to see if the form down here was submitted. So that would be an if statement is set post login, because that is the name of the input down here, the button, the submit button. So that's checking to see if that was submitted. So we'll say if login form was submitted, and in here is where we're going to get all the good stuff going. So what we want to do is grab the variables from the login form. So let's start off with that. So we're going to create a variable called form email, and then we're going to grab post, and that will be email because that's what the name is of the email field in our form. Copy that, paste it, just change it up a little bit, and we're going to say form pass for password, and then this will be password. Now, you see here I said wrap data with validate function. We've been working with that validate form data function that we've built a little while back, but I'm going to make it smarter finally and put it in a functions file so it's cleaner and we can access it without having to rewrite it every single time. So this is better practice. So now what I'm going to do is going to quickly jump over to our functions.php file, which is currently empty. And we're going to build up that form super quick. And so this is going to be our functions.php. And what we're going to do is we're going to clean the form data to prevent injections. And so I'm going to give you a list of all the functions that we're going to be using here in the script. Trims, strip slashes, HTML special chars, strip tags, and string replace. And it's going to be a little bit different from the validate form data function that we built before. So I'm going to go through it with you right now, and we're going to build it out. So start off with function. We're going to call it validate form data. And the argument we'll pass is form data. And then we're going to create a variable called form data. And this is where all the magic happens. So inside form data, we're going to start with trim and then put a semicolon there. And inside here is where we're going to put a whole bunch of other functions. So we're going to say strip slashes. And then we're going to put another one. This will be HTML special chars. And then inside HTML special chars, we're going to say strip underscore tags. And then inside strip tags, we're going to string replace. So str underscore replace. And let's work from the inside out. Now in string replace, we need to be able to add an array. And inside that array is, we're going to be replacing something. We're going to look for a string and we're going to replace it with something else. So we're going to look for the first thing to pass in, 2 strings there, and then we're going to say an opening parentheses. So we're going to look for that and comma, a couple strings. We're going to look for also this string here. So we're going to look for these 2 strings, and then we're going to close right here the array, and then comma after the array, empty string. So we're going to replace it with the empty string, and the string that we want to replace to look for this entire thing within is in form data. So right here, just so it looks a little cleaner, right here, string replace, opening and closing parentheses with an empty string, and we're going to pass that to our form data variable so that whatever the form data is going to be run through this function. Okay, now after your form data, the strip tags function, put a comma and say ent underscore quotes. And this one is related to specifically the HTML special characters. It needs to be passed in an extra argument here, and that's going to take the quotation marks and turn them into HTML entities so that we don't have anyone doing any funny business. Now, after your variable, we're going to return form data, and that's going to give us the ability to access this function and the data within it outside of just this file and this page. Okay, so now we're done with our functions PHP file. Close that up and go back to your index. So now we can wrap these bad boys in the validate form data function. So validate form data like that, and we'll do the same thing here. Validate form data. There we go. So now we can move down to the next step in our if statement is to connect to database. Now we haven't connected at all to the database, so we can write it in straight up here, or we can add it to our connection.php file, which is what we're going to do. So in your connection.php, open up a PHP script, and in here is where we're going to connect to our database. So we have our few variables. We have server, and the server is going to be localhost. And then we have username. Because we're working locally here, it's just going to be root. Password, again, will be root. And then we'll talk about the DB. And that's going to be, what is the database that we created? DB underscore client address book, I'm pretty sure. And then we're going to create a connection using a variable here. We're going to say MySQL underscore connect. And then you pass your arguments in there that we created with those variables. The first one will be server, then username, then password, then DB. And then that should be connected. So we're going to check the connection by running an if statement here. And it's going to check to see if not connected. And if it's not connected, then we're going to kill the script. And we're going to say connection failed. And a space string. They're going to concatenate the MySQL connect error function. That's going to tell us why we're not connected. So there's your connect file. Save that. We don't need to open it up again unless we made a mistake. So now we could just simply include that file. Include slash connection.php. Save that. Now what we need to do is create an SQL query. Create query, and we're going to store it in the query variable. And then the query is going to look something like this. Select name, comma, password from the users table, where email, because that's a column in the table that we've created, equals, and we have access to the data that was passed in the form email. So that's going to check with that query. And then we're going to store that query in a result. And in there, we're going to say MySQL underscore query. And this is going to query the database. 2 arguments passed in is the connection and the query itself. And now what we're going to do is verify if a result has been returned. So the way you do that is verify, and we'll check to see with an if statement. And what we'll do is a MySQL underscore num underscore rows. We're going to pass in the result and check to see if the entry, if anything has been returned at all. So that's greater than 0, which means an entry has been returned. Then we're going to store some basic user data in some variables using a while loop, while row, that's a variable, MySQL underscore fetch underscore assoc, which means associative array, pass in the result. And then in here is where we can create some variables. So we're going to call it name just to keep it simple. And we'll say row, because this is now associative array, name. Copy that, change it up a little bit, hashed pass. Now we'll store the password in there. And so what we can do now is verify the hashed password with the typed password because we have access to it here. And we're going to be using the name variable a little bit later. And so we're going to say verify the hashed password with the submitted password. So we're going to use an if statement and the password underscore verify function. A couple arguments you pass in here is form pass, which is the one that was submitted in the form, and the hashed pass, which is the one in the database that we stored in this variable right here. And then if the details were correct, we're going to store data in some session variables. And so we'll just say the session, because we have the session is active at the top of this page here, the script, logged in user, we're going to create that variable, and then we're going to store name because we added that name from here, from the database. Now we have access to it in the session variable, which means it is now going to be global across the entire site while the session is active. And then we're going to redirect the user to the clients.php page using the header function, and you pass in location clients.php. Save that. That is basically going to check to see, big F statement, if you logged in and everything is good to go, then you're going to be redirected with the session and all that good stuff to your clients.php page. Otherwise, else statement, the hashed password didn't verify or match, we're going to create an error message. Store it in login error, and we'll just say it's going to be a little bit of bootstrap here. We're going to have a div, and the text will say wrong username / password combination, try again. And then let's give some classes to that div, alert and alert danger, and that will make it look a little bit nicer once we export or spit out that variable. And now, after this if statement, we have another curly brace here, and that's for the initial if statement to check to see if there are any results in the database. We're going to say else, and this is if there are no results in the database. We're going to copy this login error message and just change it ever so slightly to say no such user in database, please try again. And then we're going to add an A tag here, and we're going to close the alert to give the user the ability to by adding the class of close and data dismiss. This is bootstrap attribute alert, and that will dismiss the alert. And then inside the tag, the times HTML entity, and that will give us an X. And now after our full if statement here, if the post login was submitted, we're going to go ahead and close the MySQL connection like so. And now we should be good to go on our login page. So why don't we try it out? Now, if I hit login, it looks like it takes me to clients.php, and I wonder why that is. I believe that's because the button is submitting to, or the form is submitting to clients.php. We need to change that to submit to the actual current page using PHP echo special chars server PHP self. Go ahead and copy that out and then save. Now let's try again. And we're going to go back to index.php here and then hit login. Okay, so something's happening and we're probably getting an error. So I think what's going on here is in our isSetPost, we're passing validate form data, but it doesn't know where that function's coming from because we haven't actually included our functions file. So go ahead and at the top here, we're going to include the functions. So include /functions.php. And now we should have access to that. Let's go back, try again. And now it's not going anywhere, but I'm pretty sure it should be working. And the way we can test that is go back. And because remember down here, we said we have these login error messages. We need to show those login error messages, and that's really easy. Right under the paragraph tag with the class of lead, PHP echo login error. And then now, if I were to try again, it's telling me the login error. And if I were just to try something else, it will give me a login error. And if I were to try brad@codecollege.ca with no password, wrong username password. So it looks like we're connecting to our database and things are working the way we want so far.